Coming along to the Capital Club tonight. If you've actually travelled from outside the DIFC, thank you, because I know the traffic is absolute hell, which is why we decided to start a bit later than usual. My name is Nigel Silito. I've actually been a member of this lovely club for some 18 years. I also do their PR, so don't be surprised if occasionally I give this club a big plug or so. And I must start by thanking Mona Kay and the general manager Mohammed for helping to organize tonight's event. It's very well attended. I've hosted many of these in the past. Normally we have, pardon me, peanut is stuck, anywhere between 30 to 40. So we've got a really good attendance and it's a hot topic. It's an area which I don't fully understand myself, but luckily we have 6 experts to my left who do understand retirement, pensions, and tax issues. But before I introduce everybody, there are just a couple of housekeeping rules. One is if you have a question, and we want to make this as informal as possible, every 20 minutes or so I'll open it up to questions, and there will be time at the end for your other questions, and there's obviously networking opportunities. And if you do ask a question, please start by giving us your name, and please remember to put your mobile on silent. If you're watching via LinkedIn Live, then welcome. And if you wish to share the LinkedIn Live feed, if you go to Capital Club Dubai, the homepage, you can then just share it with your contacts. So yes, let's use tonight as an opportunity to use LinkedIn and add some posts and messages about what is actually being discussed today. So who are our expert panelists? I thought I'd start with the ladies on my left, of course. So we have Leonie Kurzweil, who is Managing Director and Head of Tax and Structuring at Sanctuary. I'm going to keep these bios quite short because obviously you can always look at them online. Leonie is an ex-PwC London tax partner with extensive experience in advising some of the world's wealthiest individuals, their families and family offices on their tax and financial affairs. She moved to PwC's office in the Middle East in 2013, advising families in the UAE, and then she joined Sanctuary in 2021 as head of tax and structuring. Hopefully that's correct. Excellent. And then we have Nisha Braganza. Please help me out here. Braganza, apologies. Braganza, who's editor of Pensions Monitor. She's a seasoned strategy consultant with over 20 years experience assisting various financial services clients in the MENA region on a wide range of projects. She founded Insurance Monitor in 2013, and it was the first platform to assemble solid data into meaningful publications for the insurance industry. And more recently, her latest venture is Pensions Monitor, which I follow. It's a must for anyone with an interest in end of service benefit or all topics related to retirement and pensions. Then we have Con Lidis to Nisha's left, who's CEO of Abacus Financial Consultants. I've known Con for some probably 15 years, also a fellow member of this club, and he runs a practice which is about 5 kilometers from here, regulated by ESCA, with how many advisors? 8, mainly British. And your experience obviously covers investments, financial advisory, insurance, and portfolio management. We have Vish Patil to Con's left, who's the Senior Executive Officer of Nuvama Private. I had the pleasure of visiting their head office in Mumbai late last year. They're the largest Indian wealth firm. How many clients do you have, Vish, in India?
So we manage close to $55 billion and 4,000 ultra HNI families.
Okay, great, thank you. And they've recently set up here in DIFC, and they're regulated by the DFSA. He's a seasoned private banker with over 20 years experience. He's previously worked for Credit Suisse Private Bank and also Bank of Singapore, and he's established a reputation for delivering exceptional private banking and wealth management solutions to ultra high net worth individuals and families. And I thought it'd be good to have Con here because he's largely dealing with British expats. Vish is dealing mainly with non-resident Indians, as you might expect. And to his left is Chris Ball, who's the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Hoxton Wealth. Chris started his career in 2004 with KPMG as a tax advisor specializing in personal taxation issues relating to investment income and pensions. Many years later, Chris transitioned and founded Hoxton Wealth, where the sole emphasis of the group is to help expats and high net worth and ultra high net worth clients with borderless global financial advice. So the good thing about Chris's firm is that he can give advice not just to Brits and Indians, but also US citizens, because he has an office in the States regulated by the SEC. Is that correct, Chris?
That is correct indeed.
Okay, brilliant. God, I'm doing so well. And then we have Tiago Marquez. Have I pronounced your surname correct?
It's very good.
Who's a lawyer, and he's with the private clients team at Alvarez and Marshall, which is here in Dubai. And Tiago is an international tax and private clients Portuguese lawyer currently based in Dubai. He's incredibly passionate about the subject. And what may seem a bit strange is that he thinks taxation can have a positive impact on individuals, families, and businesses, which
Why
I might
not? Of
quiz
course.
you about later. So why don't we start with some scary facts about the massive retirement gap. So if we could show this slide. I did actually use ChatGPT. I don't mind admitting this, to coming up with some of these stats. So when you look at the global retirement savings gap, the World Economic Forum estimates that the global retirement savings gap could reach 400 trillion by 2050, up from 70 trillion in 2015. And I'm not going to run through all these facts, but it kind of gives you a breakdown as to what's facing the US when it comes to their residents. The UK, I know there are quite a few Brits here. The UK state pension is one of the lowest in the developed world, replacing only about 28% of average pre-retirement earnings. In the EU, particularly in Italy, Spain, France and Greece, they face unsustainable pension system because of aging populations. And everyone will be aware, of course, what happened in France recently and all the protests which erupted after the government raised the retirement age from 62 to 64. India, which is obviously always worth talking about, only 6% of India's workforce actually has a formal pension plan. Does that sound about right, Fish?
Yeah, majorly the numbers.
Okay. And obviously many elderly Indians rely entirely on the family for financial support. So that's just a quick snapshot. If we can now have the other slide with everyone's pictures, just to remind people who the panelists are. Why don't we delve straight into some questions? So the first one, which I'd like to ask the wealth managers, so that's going to be Con, Vish and Chris, is how should individuals approach retirement in the UAE and structure their savings and investments to ensure financial stability? And we need to take into account the different nationalities. So why don't I start off with you, Chris, on this very general question. And if you can keep your answers reasonably short. I only ask that because we have 6 panelists, and normally when we do these we have 3 to 4, so hence if you do go on too long I might unfortunately interrupt and be very rude.
That's fine. Well, you can shut me up if I drone on, but I don't have a tendency to do that. So hopefully it would be good. Yeah, look, I think it's an interesting, very interesting, interesting question. And I suppose the real question is why should it be different here than anywhere else? Why should you hold different assets residing in the UAE than you should if you're in the UK or the US or India? You know, broadly, my advice, and we advise clients all over, so in the US, in the UK, in Australia, Europe, it's really understanding first off how much they actually need in retirement and what you actually want. So a lot of it will come down to the lifestyle that you want to live. Do you want to fly around the world first class, or are you very happy going to Ras Al Khaimah on your holidays and spending time there where you can just drive if you're based in the UAE, or over to Oman? Or, you know, do you go out all the time, or do you, you know, do you cook at home, and do you get your groceries from Carrefour, or do you get them from Waitrose? So it very much depends upon what lifestyle that you want to have during retirement. And there's 2 stages of retirement. There's an active retirement, and then there's an inactive retirement. Active retirement is when you'll spend most of your money. Inactive retirement will be when you can't get around as much and life tends to slow down a bit. So we need to factor in that to start off with, and then we need to gear people's investments to take into account what they're likely to spend during that time. So we would typically keep 3 to 5 years of cash to fund those expenses, and then the rest we would invest into a broad range of, you know, diversified indexes, fixed income, equities. Obviously, being in this part of the world as well, the dirham is linked to the dollar, so typically it'd be US dollar asset classes that we would be picking for people. Tax at the moment isn't too much of a worry, but I think the first thing that you really need to get right is your financial plan, and building out a solid financial plan, building out that income, understanding what that looks like, and then going from there.
Great. And same question to you, Vish. And also, if you can touch on Indians' fascination with gold, because I think you've got quite an interesting stat.
So this discussion started, we have someone who was questioning, they are currently residing for 20, 30 years in this part of the world and has a lot of physical gold. If they want to relocate or retire, if it's retire and relocate in India, what can be my strategy for gold? At the same time, if they want to just stay here, how we can continue with that, safeties and all. So basically, it's one of the asset which has a cyclical up highs and lows, and last 7-8 years it went down, and suddenly for last 3 years it has been giving a spike and good returns to the client. So as Chris said, basically when you want to diversify, so you have to look at it, what is your lifestyle, what are your expenses, what will be a regular income required, and how you should diversify your portfolio, and what kind of investment risk profile you should follow in different phase. Immediate retirement, a 10-year plan retirement, or there is a continuous active spending, and then what are the dependency of the family on your income also, that is also a next generation. You might nowadays we see that a lot of time kids need a good after education 5 to 10 years for dependency on parents to build some career, business and all. So what kind of liquidity they should keep for them, and then the tax angle which comes in that when you are holding your golds and all, and what kind of residency for Indians specifically is there, what comes in a picture about global residency, number of days and all that. Indian tax law is also quite now clear about how they want to tax on the resident income and international income, and basis on that people should look at it, what should be their holding in gold and how they can diversify with others asset class also.
How much gold is held by Indians in India? Because I believe it's quite staggering compared to what's held by the US authorities.
So if you go by a December data, what roughly I remember is 8,100 ton is with the US central bank or reserves, and Indian household unofficial data is around 24,000 or 25,000 gold. So we are 3 times bigger than the US treasury. Indian household gold, I'm not talking about the bank. Bank gold is around 810 tons or something, but household is like that. So we'll buy less vegetables, but we'll buy more gold. Believe me. So you go, and the way in our festivals, which is our different festivals like Sankranti, Diwali, Baisakhis and Kerala festivals, South Indian festivals and all, we go and buy golds. Like there will be more crowd in a gold shop versus in your vegetable shops.
Thanks. And what about, thank you. What about you, Con? What are your thoughts?
Questions at this stage, but what do you do with the gold eventually? Just sell it?
So no, it has that's the last thing we'll do it. No.
Okay, you keep it.
It has it's attached with the emotions.
Oh, okay.
It carries, and legacy goes on to the next generations.
Oh, so
and,
you give it down on family.
Yeah. That's the last thing where we will use gold as our resource for any liquidity, any backup plan, or using it and either taking a lending against that or doing some business against that and all.
Cool.
That this is like it's our, we keep it in our home.
Right. That's why the price is high. Okay, got it. What was the question? Financial planning. Yeah, it was about pensions, what to do. As a financial planner, I think it's really important to, as Chris said and everyone's saying really, is to have a plan. And something quite old-fashioned is that strategic planning process. And it's a very simple thing. It's trying to understand and get your advisor to talk you through where you are today, you know, what you have, and, you know, look at the assets that you have and understand your foundation at this point. But the process is looking at where you want to get to and what you're trying to achieve. And then in a sort of salesy way, I suppose, you're looking at all the different options on behalf of that client in order to get them from A to B, from the starting point to the finishing point. And then, of course, you're looking at what's most appropriate right now. So that's the simple strategic planning process, if you like. And it's got much more technical, I suppose, and much more complicated as time's gone by. And we now use really sophisticated software to enable a client to actually see what their situation is and review it regularly. And the beauty of using a software package that is, freely available is you can talk through all the different areas that are thought about by everybody in the industry, because lots of people contribute towards that software package. But what it does is it builds up a picture that's sort of lasting and tangible, it's visible. And then it can be reviewed regularly. And I think the most valuable part of pension planning is to have that discussion with a professional so that you're avoiding a lot of the pitfalls that you might have yourself. You'll be able to bounce ideas off that person. And you can actually piece together your plan over time, improve upon it, work on it, change tack, etc. And that's where the value of an advisor and working with an advisor comes in the long term. And that's where I've been here 33 years, is why I'm still here, if you like, because the clients that I have and the clients that the company have and the people that have come after me into the business, they just talk about the plan. They talk about what it is you're trying to achieve. We're not stock pickers. It's really all about the planning. And that's really the baseline, most important thing when it comes to looking at your own pension, I think.
Okay.
Loads of other technical stuff, tax,
No,
investment, etc., etc.,
We're
etc.
going to come on to some really technical issues, but I thought we'd start off with some general questions, and one is on wealth preservation. So for old gits like me, what strategies can be used to protect someone's wealth from inflation or currency fluctuations, particularly when considering cross-border financial planning? So which of you three gentlemen would like to take on that question?
Chris.
As I've been kindly nominated. I think that inflation has been an issue, and I think what actually we've seen is that equities have dealt with inflation much better than fixed income. Obviously, gold has done particularly well off the back of that as well. Commodities generally perform well during periods of inflation. But again, it's about having a broad-based portfolio. If you are an old git, as you said, which I don't think you are, Nigel, by the way, I think obviously it's important to ensure that your portfolio has enough liquidity within it and is not too risk on the basis that you don't know where you're going to be in a cycle. So if you had everything invested in equities during the recent inflation hike we saw in 2022, it would not have been a good time in the market to be liquidating large parts of your portfolio. So that's why it's important to keep some cash around you, like we're saying, 3 to 5 years ideally, so you can ride out those market cycles. But after every bear market comes a bull market, and after every bull market comes a bear market. So we do operate in cycles, and over the course of the next 20, 30 years, we will see high levels of inflation. But to answer your question, if you're worried about inflation, I would say equities would probably be a better place to be. Companies can adjust their prices dependent upon inflation and price hikes in the wider market. So yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. And let's say you are retired living in the UAE. Medical insurance is obviously a big factor, which we're going to come on to later. And we have some experts sitting over there who can answer the question about how to resolve this medical insurance problem, because I know some people who are, let's say, 65 pay as much as $40,000 a year for their medical insurance. So we actually have three experts in the audience who might want to touch on that. But let's talk about investments. Are there any advantages to maintaining investments in the UAE post-retirement, or is it better to diversify into global markets? Who would like to answer that? Okay, thanks, Fish.
So when it comes to the wealth, sorry.
Not at all. No, go ahead.
So
I'm learning all the time here.
when it comes to a wealth planning, obviously there are a couple of factors which come in retirement. One is obviously a lifestyle, what they would like to have it, because retirement is major responsibilities are completed about next generation, family, marriages, kids' educations and all. So what lifestyle they want to live, what inflation is expected, and what kind of healthcare expenses are. These are the major expenses which comes, and accordingly then if you see majorly whoever is residing in UAE, apart from real estate investment, all their other investments are global. Sitting here, they are accessing from various platforms across Cayman Islands, Singapore, Switzerland and all. And then We look at it two types of allocation in our investments. One is a strategic allocation where we would like to have a major chunk kept in such a way that wealth preservation downside is limited or protected, and upside which can try to beat the inflation. And the others comes as a tactical allocations whenever there are opportunities. Thanks to Trump, he is giving many opportunities in last 30 days since he has come. So those opportunities, if client want to take that opportunity and make some money on that, and accordingly we keep moving on that. But yes, majorly in UAE, what I have seen in last 15, 17 years, apart from your crypto access, which is heavily here now, and real estate, rest all is well diversified, mostly in US and some in Europe. People had China, but post-pandemic, people are shying away from China because of fundamentals looks good, but technicals don't support normally on the big names in China.
Great, thank you. Before we come on to tax considerations, end of service benefit, pension transfers, and residency and taxation and lifestyle and financial considerations, so there's still quite a few areas to cover. We'll open it up to questions. So is there anyone who has a burning question to kick off with? Any takers? In that case, let's move on to tax considerations.
What about me? I don't know.
We do have two tax experts here, so maybe Leonie, you first. What are the primary tax benefits of retiring in the UAE compared to returning to one's home country? And I appreciate your experience is more to do with UK.
Yeah, that's quite an easy one if I'm comparing the UK, to be honest, at the moment.
Okay.
I think I'm actually not exactly going to answer your question because you've talked about the various investments and then protecting against inflation, etc. But at the moment, you haven't put anything around your investments to protect the actual investments. So whether it's a company or a foundation or a trust, at the moment you've just got bare investments. And I think that's where we work very closely with the wealth planners, because they pick or choose the strategy, they decide on what assets, etc. And then we would work with the client to say, well, you live here or you have family here. Let's think about a foundation, because that means it's, your assets, the investments that are going to generate sufficient income in your retirement, they're going to be protected from creditors, from marriage breakdown, from, one of the kids running off and going to Ras Al Khaimah, which now has casinos nearly. So lots of considerations, etc. So that's where I think we work very closely to look at the structure. UAE corporate tax has made a difference with foundations and companies, etc. here, but with structuring, those issues can be managed. But then you always have to have an eye on a structure mustn't be for life, because people's circumstances change. They might move. Someone in the family might go to the US, etc., which always brings in complications. So I know I didn't answer that question, but it was just talking about the investments, how we work together then to put, if you like, the wrappers around.
Okay, well, maybe this is going to be more relevant. So let's take a scenario where you're British, you've been living outside the UK for 20 years, but they're planning to retire back in the UK in a couple of years' time. What should I be thinking about doing before I go back?
Okay, so everything changes from April in the UK, and we now have a concept of long-term resident and conversely long-term non-resident. So if you've been out of the UK for more than 10 years out of the previous 20, you've now got much more flexibility to use trusts and foundations to hold assets. Previously you didn't. You might have had a 20% IHT charge just by putting assets into a trust, etc. You've now got a lot more flexibility. The ideal, when you go back to the UK, you've realised a lot of assets, you've uplifted the sort of base cost, you've washed out historic gains, etc. The first 4 years when you go back, foreign income and gains are tax-free. That's just a sort of a 4-year window. The ideal would be to spend 9 years in the UK and then either die or leave before you come. That's going to be the pattern, I think. So elderly relatives better watch out, because the rest of the family are going, how long have you been here now? You need to leave. So those are the sorts of things you should be thinking about. Clear out historic gains, take advantage of the 4-year window, and think about structures that might endure beyond your time going back to the UK.
Okay, and what about this question? How many days can I spend in the UK if I want to retire here in the UAE?
You work through a very step-by-step statutory residency test, which there's even on the HMRC website. You can go on and check. rough rule of thumb, I have a Vicky in here who's going to say something different. Rough rule of thumb, 90.
Okay.
Rough.
Okay. And for you, Tiago, how can retirees mitigate double taxation risk when receiving pensions or other income from their homeland while living in the UAE? Is that an appropriate question for you?
To start also a bit on where Leonie touched upon and how we work together with wealth planners and others for retirees, there are a lot of considerations when someone relocates to a certain country or back home to retire. It's not only the capital gains and the income, but then the inheritance tax or the gift tax or the wealth tax. And there's a lot of it that can be done on a structure side just to make sure that you are in a better position when you receive that kind of income and how you can receive that kind of income. And that's maybe a bit of the positive outlook that taxation can have, is the less you pay, the more you are happy with taxation, generally. But on the double taxation, it varies a lot based on where your pension is paid from, how your country or your country of residence or work or employment used to tax you over there, and where you relocate to. Good thing is most countries, especially if we look at it from a UAE perspective, there's something called double tax treaties. The UAE has a very, very wide network of double tax treaties that have a very nice provision saying if you receive a pension income, then that income is only taxed over here or over there, depending on the treaties. So if everything goes well, most countries tend to say it will be where you're residing that gets to tax that income. Some say, well, you worked in my country for 30 years, so I think I'm entitled to tax you a bit over the pension that I'm paying. So when you decide I'm going to relocate and retire somewhere else, first is look, if I go to country A, B, or C in my list of desires, what will be my net pension payout? Do I get the 100% that should be paid, or I only get 90% out of it, or 85 or 80?
Okay, great. Let's move on to pension transfers. I think this is for you, Chris. I'm sorry to pick on you, but what are the tax implications of transferring pensions to the UAE or withdrawing them while living abroad?
I think it's really, well, if you were talking about UK pension transfers, it's actually very tax efficient for you to withdraw them here, as I'm sure your tax panel will let you know as well. There used to be something which was called a QROPS, a qualified recognised overseas pension scheme. Typically, there wasn't any UAE ones, to my knowledge. There's none. But they used to be based in Malta. If you was looking to transfer out to something like that, you would now pay a 25% tax charge, overseas tax charge on transfer. So that kind of rules that out. So the best, the kind of normal rule of thumb is if there's two types of UK pension, as I'm sure you're all aware, defined benefit or defined contribution pension. If you have a defined benefit pension, you're going to need to put it into a defined contribution pension, and then you would look to extract it from there. If you've got a workplace defined contribution scheme, you could potentially extract it from there. But a lot of it will depend upon how long you've been out the UAE, and after that would be when you're looking to go back as well, to make sure that you don't end up paying a lot of tax if you do go back to the UK. So I would always say consult a tax advisor before you start ripping stuff out, especially if it's over £100,000. It can be quite a costly exercise, and we've seen people do that. We had a case where someone had been advised to take it out after 2 years, £1 million pension here. They took it out, they went back in the third year, and they got hit with a huge tax bill back in the UK. So it's definitely possible, very tax advantageous. Now UK pensions have been brought into scope for inheritance tax in the UK as well, which makes it even more of a benefit to take it out, because historically you would just say, well, am I going to spend it, yes or no? And if I'm not going to spend it, then it's actually, your UK pension was historically a very efficient inheritance tax vehicle. But yeah, there's a lot of benefits to doing it and to taking it out whilst you're here, but making sure that you get proper advice first.
Okay, great, thanks. Let's talk about end of service benefit. It's something I've been covering for years. Started actually with a good friend of mine, front, RBC, and we also have Hire, who specialise in offering gratuity solutions. I might be asking them a question later. So if you work for a company here and you've been there for more than 5 years, I think you get 30 days for each years of service. If you are there for just 1 or 2 years, obviously you get less. So let's talk about end of service benefit, because there's nothing like a pension. It's not going to help you when you come to retire. So Nisha, given your online portal and the advice you give people, maybe you can touch on the UAE government and their new scheme, which I think was introduced in 2023. And there's talk that it will become compulsory in due course. Once compulsory, do you think the savings scheme will help keep expats financially invested and entice people to stay longer in the country? And maybe for the benefit of those who don't fully understand gratuity and end of service benefit, and it started many decades back to make sure people had enough money to go back home if they ever lost their job. Perhaps you could touch on this.
Thanks, Nigel. So the end of service benefits savings scheme was introduced by MORI, the Ministry of Labour in the UAE last year. So 12 months into the works, there are a few fund providers that have been approved now, but no real products available for sale, to invest in. The purpose of having this in place was primarily to protect employees from employers going bankrupt and things like that happened back in 2008 and then again during COVID. But now, once the end of service benefit scheme becomes mandatory, which is what we think the government is aiming at, is this enough, to work towards someone's retirement? I met a gentleman last week and he gave me such good perspective on this. Suppose someone starts working at the age of 20, the maximum you can work is maybe 40, 45 years till you're 60. And all the scheme allocates is 1 month's salary for each year of work. So that's 30 days. At the end of 45 years of work, what you have is 45 months of salary, or that's just 4 years. And what you have after the age of 65 is maybe a life expectancy of another 20 years. And all you have set aside is 4 years of money. So definitely no, it's not enough for any kind of retirement. Typically, a pension scheme would have a mandatory contribution from the employees as well, which the UAE doesn't have at present. So that's one key difference. And the scheme allows employees to withdraw money when they change employers every time. So that's the other problem with the scheme. Is the government going to work towards that? We don't know. They're at the very beginning. Even with retirement visas coming in and long-term residency plans through golden visas, they're in the right direction. It's the first move, and maybe there could be a time when the end of service savings scheme will start looking more like a pension scheme, but that's years ahead.
Sorry, yeah, Simon.
Yeah, Nisha, I just you mentioned 4 years. I think actually, according to the labour law, it's capped at 24 months. So you actually get 24 months as a maximum payout if the employer is sticking strictly by
Well, yeah, that's if you are at one employer during your entire. Yeah, I was just generally talking about your working life, not about being at one employer. So I'm just saying that the end of service benefit scheme doesn't set aside enough money for anybody's retirement. No. Yeah, there needs to be a financial discipline from the employees to contribute as well. And maybe somewhere around 15-18% would be more appropriate. This is just 8% a month, and that too just of the basic salary.
Before we come back onto some taxation issues, let's look at lifestyle and financial considerations of cost of living, which we are all familiar with here in Dubai. So how does the cost of living in the UAE compare to typical retirement destinations in terms of healthcare, housing and daily expenses? So who'd like to tackle that question?
So I'll dip into it briefly. The UAE is an expensive place, but I think we're getting to the crux of what's going on now in as far as its pensions are underfunded. There's a huge, should we say, pension gap. And not many people that I come across, and I've been in the industry for quite a long time, contribute what they should be contributing on a regular basis. It was a very simple little example of what you should be doing that I was taught many, many years ago, and it kind of holds true. And if you think about your age, and then you divide your age by 2, that's the percentage of your income that you should be setting aside annually So if you're 30, you should really be keeping around about 15% of your income for the long term, and so on. And you can work it out according to your own age. I'm not going to go through the whole, gambit. But it's very, very important to do something. And I think a lot of people defer and defer and defer because they're perhaps looking for the best solution. They're looking for the cheapest solution, or they're looking for something that's going to perform the best. Almost all of that is irrelevant. And it's superseded by the fact that if you do something and then perhaps invest it wisely, then you're going to be much better off than trying to delay and find the best solution. I think that's really important. And it's also, when you're picking investments, of course, as investment advisors and as financial planners, we can guide you with that. And anybody in our industry can. We all have opinions, but there's loads of information online. But really the most important thing is the planning. It's getting the relevant contribution according to your income that's going to be relative to what you need at the end of the day. Because it's all interlinked, really. If you're earning a fortune when you're 20, you've got to put a fortune away as well. It's a percentage, and of course, it'll eventually transpire that you've put away enough. But if you're not earning very much, obviously you get away with contributing less, but it will still be relatively good at the end of the day, as long as you've been saving for long enough, you get the benefit of compound interest. This is really valuable, and that longevity of investment just gets you into the habit. And whereas, like you say, the local pensions are just not going to provide, you've got to be disciplined about this. And the gap has emerged in the provision that's being provided, if you like, by yourself. I think it's because of a lack of faith in the market, or it's a lack of understanding as to what you need to do. But if you buy into these simple strategies, you can do a lot of the work yourself. It's almost a DIY solution to think about that.
Well, a consideration is always, when you want to stay or leave, is medical insurance, because it can be very expensive. And we have Stephen McLaren, and I did warn him I might be asking this question. So, Stephen, what can someone who is quite elderly staying here do to stop paying ridiculous sums of money for medical insurance? Are there going to be any solutions from the government? Are there going to be retirement homes in the future where there may be discounts on medical insurance? So what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. There's a huge gap in the market for people that are retiring here. What most employers don't realise is that there's not really a scheme out here, or very few, with a continuation of portability option for anyone. So although they may be even planning to, take out medical insurance when they retire, at that point, most people will have some form of an existing condition that will be charged more by the insurer. And the individual market, which is what we're talking about there, is really very immature to where it needs to be. You can go down the local market route, and every year your premium could increase in the Dubai market by 100%. So if you have a cancer, then you're looking at 100% increase every year if you stay here. If you go down the route, this gentleman here, David, next to me, go down more of a Bupa or a Cigna route, there's more of a pooled approach that everyone's there together. However, it will go up typically 10-12% per year, plus every year you're older, they'll charge you more as well. So again, back to the financial planning, you've got to plan about a 15% increase. So you can easily be spending, 40, 50,000 pounds a year in your 80s. And it's very much misunderstood. There's only one insurer really that's got any continuation option here, and that's Bupa, who are in the top price range.
Right, okay, so there's no solution imminent?
Not yet, not yet. I mean, I've done one for the British, but that's only British people so far, called BritCare. Okay. There's a definite need for sort of more of a robust top-up market.
We call it like home country, you take medical insurance. Obviously, it cannot be used in emergencies, but if there are some medical requirement where you can travel back to home countries, like in India, we give it that to our clients, and they can go to good hospitals and all and try to find some medical assistance there, which is relatively less costly. But yeah, it cannot be like a full solution. It is not an emergency, but yeah, if you have some regular where you need checkups, some assistance and all, those can be. That's the part-time solution, I would say.
Got it, thank you. And as we've got Mohammed, who's the CEO of Hire, digital insurance company here. Mohammed, do you have any thoughts on medical insurance and solutions?
So health insurance has been imposed, let's say, in the last year, has become mandatory. And actually the way it become, I would speak even for the, I would say, the active part of the population now, we used actually to have better health insurance before it became mandatory. What happened is that when you make something mandatory, you tend actually to lower the benefits for those who used to have better benefits, because that was not for everyone. It led the market to a kind of commoditization of the insurance products as such, and now there's been only a war on the pricing, and the pricing has not been done actually locally. It has relied a lot on reinsurers who came on this market because of the big volumes that it represents as a whole. The thing that we are speaking here is still too small actually to absorb the volume necessary to get the right pricing at the moment. And this is why as well insurers are not positioning themselves in this segment, just because now they don't see it as an opportunity which would allow to lower the end premium that this segment of the population will have to pay.
Okay, great, thank you. We've had a question from Billy on LinkedIn. It's to do with succession planning. How do estate planning laws differ in the UAE compared to home countries, and how does this impact wealth transfer to heirs? So who'd like to answer that?
Doesn't it? Go for it, yeah. Oh.
Estate planning, and it goes back to Leonie's first comment and how we work together with the wealth planners, is it needs to be part of your structure, and it needs to be part and consider where your assets are. So it needs to fall within, if your assets globally, how will they be impacted, and what are the laws in each of them that can impact that the succession on those assets. So do you have a will per country? Do you need a will per country? Do you need to structure them all individually, or can you have it as a pooled option like a foundation or a trust to all those kinds of assets? And ideally, as a good rule of thumb is, where you're living, do a will first of all. Doesn't matter how young you are, do a will, just to have a safeguard, and always have it recognized by the country where you decide to relocate to, if it is still good based on that. For instance, if you do a UK will and you move to the UAE, is it still fully valid for what you have in the UAE or not?
Great, thank you. Yes, sorry, yeah.
Worth mentioning slightly further to that, because I've done the course recently. We had somebody in the office explaining this. I'm not the expert, but everything will resort to the laws that are here locally if you don't have something else. So it's really important to understand that it's Sharia law that's going to take over in the event of your death. So the first male heir will receive a percentage, your wife will, and your children will. It'll be divided according to Sharia law. So that only changes if you do something positive, such as take out a will with DIFC or with you know, the local courts here. DIFC will is obviously well tried and tested, and that will actually isolate your assets locally. But it's really important to have a will for each of the countries that you have assets in. So wherever you have assets, make sure you have a will, and you know, it'll save your beneficiaries, shall we say, and your ancestors a tremendous amount of trouble. Dependents, thank you.
And descendants.
Descendants. Ancestors.
That's a good
Yeah,
point.
whoever else.
And I think this is a good question for Leonie. What are the challenges of setting up wills or trusts in the UAE for retirees with international families?
The general rule, so the wills, there are two main wills you can have here. There's the DIFC and there's the Abu Dhabi Judicial Department will. Very few people use the Abu Dhabi solution, but it's actually 900 dirhams versus 10,000 or whatever dirhams here. Sorry, I know we're in the DIFC. Don't record for a minute.
You are you never know, they might be watching.
Yeah, I'm speaking up for ADGM here. So yes, have wills, but also the number of people who say, oh, I don't need to do anything for my assets because I'm going to follow Sharia. It won't, unless you make your assets in other countries follow Sharia. They won't. The UK has forced heirship in intestacy rules. France, Spain, most countries have some sort of forced heirship. So you have got, if you want your assets to pass in a certain way, you have to make them do that. Now, what we then tend to do is say, look, if you've got assets in 5 different countries, when someone passes away, you've got probate in 5 different countries, and it's a real pain, and assets can get frozen for years. So why don't you take them out of your estate now, put them in a foundation, or put them in an offshore trust, or even a holding company, so at least you've only got a single asset, being the shares in the holding company. It's all about trying to simplify, because generally what happens when someone passes away, you know, the emotional issue, but then people are trying to work out, well, what did dad have? Where was it? Who had it? Who owns it, etc. So it's really beholden on people, I think, to try and put their house in order, simplify as far as possible, and make life easier using generally splitting offshore assets and onshore assets generally. Foundations work very nicely for onshore assets, GCC assets. If the amounts are significant enough and you don't have perhaps UK issues or anyone else's issues, offshore you might want to use a trust or a holding company structure.
Great, thank you. Before we come on to government policies, are there any questions from? Yes, please, thank you.
Hi, my name's Petra Foster. I own properties in the UK and I have a will in the UK. So what you just said scares me. So what should I do now in terms of my will? And I'm going to be buying properties here this year as well. So in terms of my will, I've got my UK will.
Will follow, UK properties will follow UK will. So you'll find there, you've got UK inheritance tax.
Yes.
You might want to think about taking life assurance out.
I have that.
Okay. Is it written? Are you a Brit?
I'm a Brit, yes.
Okay. Have you? What you want to do is to write the life policy in trust. So if something happens to you and there's £1 million of cover, it just doesn't fall into your estate.
It's in trust.
As well. It's in. So you've done it all perfectly.
Oh.
Yeah. You see?
Are you sure I'm all going to be okay?
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh no, are you the lawyer with the bad news now? Okay.
Take the appointment of Leonie and then.
Thank you.
Okay, nice question, thank you.
And then he got-
UAE will. You would take a UAE will to cover your UAE assets, or you'd consider, you know, putting into a foundation. Yeah.
So what happens here is that the next step, what we try to do is whoever are the ultimate beneficiaries and whatever their residence is going to be in future, we keep that in mind so that tomorrow if they are going to claim that assets, that money, what kind of tax implications can be there, the probabilities. And then we try to see how we can, one of the solutions like she said about life insurance and all, at the same time we will try to see how we can ring fence with the perpetual structures and the structures with joint survivorship ownership so it can continue, and then how they can save the taxes across various. Because normally in our cases many of will here, the parents are here, but the next generation is either in Canada, US, UK, Australia, Switzerland and all, and that's the complex structure we always get. Out of 10, at least 7 or 8 structures are like that, where the next generation is going to be residing in that part of the world.
Okay, great, thanks Phil. Well, let's look at government policy. So how do current and future UAE residency visa policies influence the retirement decisions of expats? A tough one. Anyone want to take that? Obviously not. Next one is what should expats know about the UAE's taxation landscape in the event of future policy changes? Too tough?
Not really. I think.
Okay.
I think
Who knows
the
future?
who knows the future, but the expectation is things are just going to get more and more taxable, if you like, in this environment. I think the tax situation has changed since I came here 33 years ago, where there was no tax at all. Now we have some tax, it's corporation tax. You know, as sure as eggs are eggs, there's going to be income tax at some point, maybe very small. Arguably, we have some already.
There will be income tax. Income tax needs a whole raft of. The UK can't go. HMRC. Someone's got to collect it. Someone's got to manage it. Someone's got to oversee. Much easier to put
It's big.
corporation tax up to 12%, VAT up to 10%.
Oh, I agree
You know,
entirely. But it's
and also
once things start to go in that
generally-
direction.
Yeah, but generally with income tax comes some sort of give back. So that's where you get health, you know, the health service. That's where you get education. Maybe it's I think it's a step that's a long way away, and there's a lot more they'll do.
And they are looking to introduce it in Oman, aren't they, soon?
That's Oman.
Only on the sense that if we look at it, as there's been quite vocal of the government saying there won't be income tax coming up soon. And if we look at even on Nigel's comment on Oman, that can also be an outlook for the future. There was everything set up in stone for there to be an income tax. And the ultimate decision was we won't do it, because that will move people away from Oman rather than attract them. And if we look at that from a UAE perspective, is the country is doing quite well at VAT, customs, corporate income tax. It's not tax-free, and it's still attracting a whole lot of population, both retiring and working population. So I don't see an income tax coming to the UAE anytime soon. And to Leonie's point, and fairly, is there's usually an exchange to it. So what would be granted over to the population versus that income tax?
Before we come on to the final question, what role do geopolitical factors play in retirees' decisions to stay in the UAE versus returning to their homeland?
I think obviously if it's not a politically stable place, you probably want to go more where it is politically stable. I mean, here, I probably shouldn't say what I was going to say, but you know, there is it is ruled with an iron fist. Let's put it that way. You know, if you step out of line, you get brought back in pretty quickly, which in more liberal economies could be argued as maybe a good thing. We're definitely seeing the likes of the US, especially with Trump's comments yesterday, how that will impact places like the Middle East as well, which will be interesting. And I think ultimately, as we kind of get more, you know, more polarized in terms of you're either really right, you're really left, places like the UAE will probably do really well because they sit in the middle. They don't take any sides. You know, they're the kind of the new age Switzerland, as someone described it to me previously, which is probably a fair comment. And out of most of the conflict that's happened in the world, they've done relatively well and managed to you know, grab a lot of high net worth individuals, ultra high net worth individuals in and provide them with a, you know, a good landscape to do their best at.
And aside from the emotional connection that one might have with his home country, then the next kind of one or two decision points are lifestyle and security. And on both, I think the UAE factors in quite well and highly globally.
Really well.
So I think it's still a fair point.
Question for each of you, and you don't know this is coming. So if you are planning to stay here a long time, and people are now, used to be years back, you know, people have 2 or 3 year stints. I've been here 20 years, many people 3. Simon's probably not that you're the oldest, but you've been here how long? 31 years. So there are loads of people who've been here for decades. So what's the one bit of advice you would give someone who is planning to stay in the UAE for many years to come? And I'll start with the advisors first. So, Con.
I've been here 33 years, made a lot of mistakes. My advice would simply be live within your means, don't be distracted by what else is going on, and make sure you have your plan and kind of stick to it. You've got to be flexible, but you've got to have, if you like, a long-term goal in mind. Wherever you are, that's true. But I think it's really important here because there's no safety net. So it's really quite important to make sure that you just stick to your plan, ignore the noise, and keep going.
For the expats, normally I have advised don't over leverage, and keeping in mind if you have a long-term plan, as everyone talks about health insurance, make sure that you plan it your finances in such way one kitty can take care of your next, once you retire, 10 to 15 years health insurance.
And advice on the don't over leverage, because I think that a lot of people get caught up with that very early when they get here. Mine could be slightly different. I think it's to take every opportunity that comes your way. There's so much opportunity here. You're in a really fast-paced, growing economy. There's huge amounts of interesting and cool stuff that you can potentially do to accelerate yourself and accelerate your career. And I think you should try and latch onto that as much as possible. It doesn't happen everywhere, and in certain parts of the world, a lot of people would give their right arm to be in a place like this that's growing as quickly as it is. So I think take on everything you can.
Yeah, I agree, Chris. I think it's keep an open mind and then just marry someone rich, basically. Which I haven't done, by the way. I haven't taken my own advice.
So I've spent 13 years here in Dubai, and before that 28 years in Kuwait. So I'm a Gulfie and I've hardly lived in India. What I would suggest is, and something that Kuwait didn't allow us to do was, buy an apartment or invest in property. So we were always paying rent there. But this country allowed you to do that. So as soon as I moved here, I think that's the first thing I did. And I've just hedged, rental price increases. Second thing I would say is buy a house in your real home. So if something goes wrong here, you have somewhere to go with. So that's what I would do. Yeah.
And the will.
And which I haven't done.
Two wills. And Tiago, something to do maybe with wills or something to do with tax preservation.
Exactly. Gonna say that. So follow all of this advice. Maybe Leonie's first, but then always do the same thing as the audience did: is ask the question: Am I protected? Is my my son, my daughter protected? Is my wife or my husband protected? Have I done everything that I could to protect my assets? And have I done everything I could when I'm young for when I'm old?
Questions. So I'd like to thank the panelists for their time. So if you could show your appreciation. They will be staying behind, hopefully, so you can obviously ask one-to-one. But is there anyone here who'd like to ask? Yes, the gentleman at the back. And if you can give us your name.
Hi, it's Michael Edge. I was just wondering, apart from the UAE, is there anywhere where you'd recommend retiring to? And what are the why? You know, are there specific benefits around the insurance or things like that?
I think Florida. I detected a kind of British accent that's actually been really attractive. That's obviously been attractive for a number of years, but there's no state level tax there. There's only federal tax. Florida is a fairly stable state. It's a nice place to live. You've got sunshine all year round. Some of the best golf courses. Very, very similar to here. Probably a bit more polished, I would say. That's been a place that we've seen a lot of people go to. Italy, if you've got a lot of money and you don't want to pay a lot of tax and you want to live in Europe, that's a very interesting destination. Probably the new Portugal. Now they've got rid of the non-habitual residence regime, so that's another one we've seen a lot of people go to, and still people go to south of France, Spain, these kind of places as well. But Italy and Florida is where we're seeing more people go to at the moment.
So normally it goes with two ways: whether you want to relocate and retire, or retire and relocate. Basis on that, then what health conditions, what health benefits you need, and what kind of lifestyle and what kind of savings can afford that lifestyle. So that's the question: at what age you want to relocate and retire, or retire and relocate?
Do you want to go somewhere you pay no tax, but you might not be that happy, or you want to be happy and pay a little bit of tax? So usually, if a decision is purely driven by tax reasons, you will regret it eventually. So within what is your preferred and lifestyle, see what tax you can take advantage of that. And that is, for example, like Chris was saying, on Europe. You have good options in Europe. You have good options in South America, for instance, or Southeast Asia. So it depends on lifestyle first, what you prefer, how long can you see yourself anywhere, and then how you can make tax a good part of your life.
As well for the interim retirement. I think ultimately when you do get old, very old, you're going to be near, you want to be near, I'm sure, family and friends for that support. Whereas there could be an interim, and that interim period, let's say, I'm hoping it's between sort of 65 and 80, you know, you're going to be fit enough, healthy enough to enjoy other places before you finally move back. So it can all fit into the plan, and it all depends on the money you've got. So the plan will show you whether or not you can do what you want to do, and if you can't, you know, then you scale it back a little bit.
Yeah, please. Sorry, if we can have the mic. Oh, just shout.
I have retired for the last 9 years here, and my husband 6 years ago. So basically, the big issue is medical insurance. So what will happen is that my company used to cover my family, and I retired 9 years ago, and suddenly it hit us. What's going to happen to us that I have retired? So my husband and I, we discussed that it's better that we have personal insurance aside from the company insurance. It might be expensive, but I think that's the best solution for medical insurance, because hand in hand, you have an insurance that's covering you personally and at the same time, because once you retire or you stop your employment, the company stops it as well. So you need to have that personal insurance, and that's what we did. So I think for those who are retiring, I think you need to think about that before your company stops your medical insurance.
Good.
a good idea. The benefit, and if there are pre-medical
It
conditions
was
that gets covered.
expensive, but I think that's preparing you if you really want to retire here. The reason why we retired is because of the climate.
Any more questions? Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Tim Morgan, ERE Property, an old girl who lives over here and won't live here forever. But is there any benefits that you guys see from going for a golden visa as you get a bit older? I'm 61, might want to stay here for a few more years, or is it just a bit of a distraction?
I suppose, an attraction for people to have a golden visa because it gives you that period of time that you don't have to worry about getting a visa. I think that's the only benefit to a golden visa, the fact that you can have 10 years and you can put your family on. There are going to be retirement visas. I'm not sure how they, or whether or not they're available already.
With a golden visa, you can work and then that income is not taxed over here.
And your employment, basically, if you're employed, if your employment stops, your golden visa still continues and you're free to move somewhere else, start your own and all. That benefit you'll have.
Gives you that guaranteed period.
In fact, one of my client who's in that same age, he has closed his company, but his golden visa is live, so he's going with that also again now on. So that benefit you will have it.
It's the retirement visa. So it is, imagine, so it's 5 years and it's 1 million dirhams property or value, and you have a visa for 5 years. And that speaks a bit also on the UAE vision to attract that kind of population as well, or to just to retain those that are here.
Thank you.
Yeah, true.
You can have parents and house help.
Family and house help.
Yes, I saw it, not just restricted to one.
Yeah, true. That's a good.
So yeah, that's well
Hi, it's Petra again. I just wondered, as an expat, and I have my own pension, am I still entitled to a UK pension, like a normal state pension as well?
Paying voluntary contributions. You have to have a minimum of 10 years to qualify for a UK
So I
state
haven't
pension.
paid since living here.
Yeah, you can back pay. Yeah.
I don't want to. Do I need to, or?
But if you don't want it, you won't get it.
Okay, but I have been, but I have been paying. Obviously, I've been working since I was 16 years old.
Yeah, you can go onto the UK state pension website. You can do a state pension check. It will tell you there, and it will tell you how much you can back pay.
Okay.
Well, it depends upon your situation. If you've been working when you left and you work when you're here, typically it'll be class 2, which is cheaper. If you haven't been on the website, they always tell you to top up with class 3 because it is a higher contribution. But if you haven't been working in the UK, but then you haven't been, and also you haven't been working here, then you would have to pay class 3. So I'm assuming you are working here and you were working in the UK. Is that correct?
I've been a business owner for 13 years now. So here I've been here for 7 months.
Okay.
But I work for myself. I'm a business owner.
Fine. Yeah. So you would qualify for class 2. But is your business in the UK? Or is it here?
Can I suggest?
Yes.
Afterwards, yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Take his appointment.
Sorry.
Yeah, so this question is to the wealth planners. Do you factor residency options when you're advising your clients? Because now there are a host of different options with different taxability, and people have started calling these residency as an asset class. So do you factor that as well in your advice?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, realistically, it works the other way around. We don't recommend destinations. We talk to people about where they want to go and plan accordingly. But if you wanted recommendations, you need to state really what it is you're looking for, in the same way as the question came up at the back there. But certainly it has to be taken into consideration for tax reasons, for planning reasons, for assets, etc., for
And
distribution.
And the offshore banks are also very particular about the CRS FATCAs, and they ask for the residency certificates. So keeping in mind the tax implications on that, we want to make sure that we talk about it, because a couple of countries look at global income, and they look at how much time you have spent in a particular country, or somebody who want to be a global citizen. Now many countries are putting tax on a global income smartly. That is happening in India also.
very important when you're setting up your investments as well, especially from a tax perspective. So if you do have an idea in mind, yes, you want it to be flexible, but you also want to make sure that you've got the right structuring, as our tax advisor was saying, in place first, because that can it can heavily impact how much you actually get at the end.
Yeah, so we see a lot of people having local businesses deciding here for tax or whether for what climate, etc. But then when you look at retiring, you have to consider things with climate tax.
Yeah.
The way you try to structure in corporate place of effective management, POEM, the same way we try to implicate on the other things, how you are going to be, what kind of time you are going to spend in a particular country, and what's the residency you have it, what passport you have it, and where you're going to file your taxes. That comes in picture.
Okay, well, we've done an hour, so thank you very much for your time. And if you're watching via LinkedIn, thank you. And we're all going to move next door. So if you want to carry on asking questions, that would be great. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.